Hello, my name is Memo. This is my channel, FancyMemo. Welcome back to my channel. And if you're watching this on the day of this video's release, the date would be October 10th, 2024, otherwise known as 10/10. And because it is 10/10, I've decided to make a video talking about 10 albums I would consider a 10 out of 10. I would consider all these albums perfect in my personal opinion. I want to emphasize that as much as possible because music is subjective at the end of the day. Just because I think it's perfect doesn't mean you have to think it's perfect, and vice versa. This list consists of 10 albums I personally think are perfect. The first 5 are hip-hop albums, hip-hop adjacent albums, while the other 5 are other genres of music. And I did this because, I am more of a hip-hop head, so I listen to more hip-hop, and I didn't want to overflow with too much of it, so I've decided to limit myself with 5 albums that I think are perfect in the hip-hop realm, and then 5 other albums from other genres that I think are also perfect. Of course, I'm slowly trying to discover more and more music, especially with the classic reaction series that I've been doing. So hopefully by next year, if I make this video again, I'll have more albums that I've discovered through that series and include that into my perfect albums list. And yeah, these 10 albums aren't the only albums I would consider perfect, but they are the ones that I do want to talk about for today. So I guess let's do that. But before we do, if you like music related content like this, please subscribe, since that is what I do here. And if you're already subscribed and you want more of this for some reason, check out my Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. If you're into basketball, more specifically NBA basketball, check out my basketball podcast. It's called Above the Rim Rundown, where we run down all things NBA. I do it with a buddy of mine. It's really cool, pretty interesting. The season's almost starting, so we'll definitely have a lot to talk about soon. But yeah, check that out if you're interested. And yeah, let's get into this. There's no order, they're all perfect, so I highly recommend every single one of these albums, and they're definitely albums you have heard of before. There's no like super deep underground record that no one has heard about. We're starting off with like probably the most obvious 10 out of 10, which is To Pimpa Butterfly by Kendrick Lamar, which there's not much I could say about this album because everybody has basically glazed this album to the ends of the earth since release, and there's good reason for it though. Whether you talk about the production with the jazzy hip-hop flair each track has, it has some wild production in there, or we could talk about the writing and how Kendrick Lamar takes the opportunity to talk about injustices going towards the black community within America, like police brutality as an example. The way he uses metaphors within this album, like in Wesley's Theory, there was a lot going on in that track. That's probably my favorite Kendrick Lamar track, honestly, based off of the writing, based off of the jazzy instrumental. Thundercat had a role within that song and within this album as well. We also have Soundwave, Terrence Martin, Flying Lotus, Knowledge, just to name a few. Boy Wonder, Pharrell Williams, they're all participating within this album on the production side. Speaking of participating, there was great features as well, like Anna Wise, Thundercat again, Snoop Dogg, Rhapsody, just to name a few. And yeah, the significance of this album is unmatched. This is the type of album that people study, the type of album that people look into for inspiration. And the way that this album has aged is honestly scary, because a lot of what Kendrick Lamar is talking about on that album applies today as well. It's crazy how, it's been almost 10 years since this album has released and it feels like nothing has changed. So yeah, Kendrick is a GOAT, and this is one of the most goated albums you could ever make. Like, this is up there with the best of the best in the hip-hop genre. So of course I'm gonna talk about To Pimpa Butterfly. Let's talk about the next album, which this might be a curveball for a lot of people. If you're following the channel, following the TikTok, you would know that I love this album and I consider this a perfect album, and it's I Laid Down My Life For You by JPEG Mafia. I think this is his best album to date, beating out All My Heroes Are Cornballs and Veteran. And there's a lot of things that JPEG Mafia does on this album that he does on other albums, especially on the lyrical side. Lyrically, he's amazing as always, and the topics of his lyrics seems to always go towards his haters, and he finds very creative ways to hate on other people, hate on his haters, hate on Nepo babies, just being as toxic as possible in the funniest ways. And he knows that he's like a villain. In the very first track, he compares himself to Dylan Brooks, which I thought was great. I also quickly wanted to shout out how vulnerable JPEG Mafia was within this album, which isn't something he usually does in his past albums, but he really delve into more serious topics within a couple of these tracks, especially on I Recovered From This. I think he did a great job on that track. So lyrically, he's on point. And rapping wise, he is like an assassin on the technical rapping aspect of his music. There's no denying that. Maybe I wish he did a bit more singing on this album, which I always like his singing, but the rapping here is top tier. It's so good. The main reason why I consider this perfect and not his other albums is the production. I think the way he implemented like heavy metal production and beautiful string production as well, sometimes within the same song, is mind-blowing. I haven't heard an artist pull that off, not only within a song but within an entire album. I genuinely can't think of one within the hip-hop genre, once again, that has done something like that as well as what JPEG Mafia did. Like, how can you make a song as beautiful as Don't Put Anything on the Bible with an amazing feature from Buzzy Lee? How can you make a song like that and on the other end of the spectrum make something like Sin Miedo, where it's like almost like a dance beat and it's very harsh and glitchy and loud? Like, these two songs sound so opposite from each other, yet they're in the same track list, and neither of them feel like outliers. They feel like they belong on this album. What also helps is that I feel like there's just so many songs here that have so much replay value. I've been obsessing over this album. I go back to it all the time. Some of the best features on any JPEG Mafia album as well. I mentioned Buzzy Lee, but we got Denzel Curry as well. We got Vince Staples, who absolutely killed it. So yeah, maybe not a lot of people would agree. I'm not expecting people to agree with me, but I Laid Down My Life For You is a perfect album in my opinion, and it's my latest perfect album, my latest 10 out of 10. Next, let's talk about some West Coast classics and talk about The Chronic by Dr. Dre. I think this is his best album, and I think this is a very, very important album because this is essentially the blueprint for West Coast hip hop. This is the introduction of G-Funk, and the production here is one of one. It's some of the best production you'll ever hear on an album. It's as simple as that. And yeah, maybe Dr. Dre isn't the most lyrical rapper. He's not the best at that. But luckily, on almost every single track, Snoop Dogg is there to help him out. It feels more like a collab album because of how many features Snoop Dogg has on this album, and they bounce off each other so well. So well. It's seamless. It really is. And there's just so many classics within this track list as well. Fuck With Dre Day, Let Me Ride, Rat-Tat-Tat-Tat, Nothing But a G Thing. Talk about a classic right there. Like, this is such a fun listen to, especially if you're like a West Coast guy like me, just popping this album on, taking a drive, maybe going to the beach, or just hanging out with friends on a hot summer day. This is the soundtrack for those moments. So yes, shout out to Dr. Dre. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, the opposite side of the country, we got some East Coast hip hop. We got some WuTang in the building with Enter the WuTang, 36 Chambers. And yeah, this album is also filled with the best classics in hip hop history. When we talk about Bring the Ruckus, when we talk about Cream, when we talk about Shame on a Nice Fellow, when we talk about Method Man, Protect Your Neck, Tears. This is another album that is a blueprint. This is the foundation for New York hip hop, for boom bap, for East Coast hip hop in general. The way that they sampled on this album is crazy, especially implementing those like old kung fu movie snippets within this album. Not only is that super raw, but like the skits they implement as well, just reminding people that these aren't just artists, but they're like cold-blooded killers as well. This is one of the most badass albums I've ever listened to. And yeah, this one album made Wu-Tang Clan as a group legends. Because of this album, they have legend status, and you can't take that away from them. Each member here has so much charisma, whether you talk about Ghostface Killer or Method Man, we could go on and on. These guys gave it their all and made for a perfect album. Alright, next, let's talk about my favorite album of all time, probably. If I were to rank albums, that would be like super hard, but I usually say this is my favorite album of all time, and it's Madvillainy by MF Doom and Madlib, one of the best rappers of all time, joining forces with one of the best producers of all time, will make for an amazing album. And that's what happened here. The production here is lo-fi, it's dusty, it's sampled bass, it's all over the place. You really never know what to expect while listening to a Madlib beat. And that's perfect because it's hard to predict what MF Doom is going to do on the mic. You know, he's sometimes rapping about smoking weed. Sometimes he's rapping about Cheetos, Fritos, and Doritos. You don't know what to expect from these guys. And that's what makes this album fun. No matter how many times I listen to it, there's always a surprise around the next corner. You never know what to expect, even with multiple listens of this album. This album could be studied if you're a hip-hop head for the lyrical densities of it all within the writing, or the rapping masterclass MF Doom has, because those rhyme schemes that he has on this album is insane. You can't mimic some of these rhyme schemes. This is the only person that could rap like this is probably MF Doom, honestly. And yeah, it's amazing from beginning to end. I like how they bring in their alter egos as well. Quasimodo made an appearance. Victor Vaughn made an appearance. Some of the most classic MF Doom songs are on here, like All Caps, Rhinestone Cowboys, Figaro, Accordion. The fact that Accordion is on this track list, it's insane. Like, who raps over an accordion beat? Only MF Doom can do that with so much success. So yeah, shout out to both of them. Rest in peace, Doom, a legend. Like, this album has just stuck with me for so long, and it's always fun going back to it and revisiting. So thank you to Doom, thank you to Madlib, rest in peace the villain. And there we go. Those are the first 5 albums I wanted to talk about. Those are the ones that are in the hip-hop realm. Now let's jump into the next album, which I guess I lied. This is kind of hip-hop, but not really. Not really. And we're going to talk about Igore by Tyler, the Creator, which is probably the first 10 I've ever given on this channel, or within the history of covering music content on this channel. And yeah, it was love at first sight, honestly, or first listen I should say, because Flower Boy was so amazing. I really didn't know how Tyler could top this, but then the rollouts started coming out. I was loving the visuals, I was loving the snippets, I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and then boom, Igore was released, and I couldn't stop listening to this album. It's very rare for me to do that. For me to go back to an album over and over again, repeating it within the same day, I never do that. But I did that for Igore. I did that for some of these perfect albums because they're just that good. And I think this is a brave album for Tyler to do. The fact that he was able to make a whole album about a love triangle, about this character Igore loving another guy that's with a woman. That doesn't happen in mainstream media. You never hear stories about that in TV shows or movies, or especially rap albums. Well, this is more like a pop-centric album with those amazing synthesizers within this album. It's almost like a synth pop album. It's hard to describe, honestly. You could call it art pop, some people call it R&B. I don't know how to describe this album besides perfect. Like, this is a perfect album, perfect track listing. The way this album flows is so well curated. It tells the story perfectly, honestly. Perfectly told story with amazing lyricism. Some of my favorite Tyler, the Creator tracks, like Gone Gone Thank You. That's probably my favorite from him ever, and the lyrics there are so good, so heartbreaking. There's other classics like Earthquake, like I Think, like New Magic Wand, A Boy Is a Gun. Some amazing features as well, like Kanye, Playboy Cardi, Lil Uzi Vert, CeeLo Green. A bunch of features that were hidden and still technically hidden, but you know, they've been technically released. Yeah, amazing, perfect album. I guess one more thing, the singing on this album. Like, I know he used vocal manipulation, pitching up his voice a lot, but I think it works so well. And for that to come from a rapper with such a weird, deep, and unique voice like his is pretty impressive how he's able to pull all this together. So yeah, there's my spiel on Igore. I think if you know me, you know how much I love that album. But yeah, let's move on to Toxicity by System of a Down. Again, if you know me, you know that I listen to a lot of System of a Down back in the day, especially in high school. And I think the reason why I gravitated towards their sound is because I love the aggression. You know, as an angsty teenager, you gotta listen to some angry music at times. I like the performances. Although they're pretty good singers, they're also like low-key rapping on some of these tracks. And again, my background is hip-hop. That's what I grew up on. So I think because of those worlds were melding together in such a weird and creative way, in a seamless way as well, I just gravitated towards System of Down like crazy. And yeah, Toxicity, in my opinion, is their best album. It's a perfect album with the classics like Chop Suey, like Prison Song. Prison Song is a crazy way to start off an album. The fact that they're spewing all these statistics about mass incarceration within that song is such a courageous and insane way to start an album, but it's like nothing but facts. And it's crazy how this album was released in 2001, and they were talking about this issue, which continues to be an issue today. But yeah, we got Prison Song here, we got Bounce, we got Toxicity, of course, Aerials, bro. This album has aerials on it. God damn. So yeah, I love the instrumentation. I love the chaos within this album. The yelling, the screaming, the rapping, the singing. It's all performed super well. It's always a fun time listening to them. You have to headbang within this album. It's against the law if you don't. I don't know if you knew that, but it's against the law. So yeah, I love this album. It's utter chaos, but they have great messages within their lyricism as well. So how can you not love an album like this? Alright, let's move on to Demon Days by Gorillaz, my favorite band of all time, if you consider them a band. I know they're like a virtual band, so I don't know if people count them as a band, but to me they are. To me, they're the best band. Noodle, Murdoch, Russell, Tootie, they're goats. They're goats in my opinion. And Demon Days is a reason why. I love the eeriness of it all. You know, this album is very apocalyptic if you have listened to it. There's some really like tragic themes within many of these songs. Like Kids with Guns, which was inspired by when this kid brought a knife to his kindergarten class and was showing it to everybody, which is a crazy sight to see, I'm sure. But what's crazier is that happened before Demon Days was released, so either in 2005 or before 2005. And it's crazy that is an issue that's getting worse, at least in the US, because it happens. Kids be bringing guns and knives to school nowadays. So stuff like that are reasons why this album has such a dark undertone. Yeah, there are tracks like Dare that brighten up the track list at times, but for the most part, this is a very eerie and dark album with amazing tracks like November Has Come with MF Doom on it, Dirty Harry with Booty Brown, Oh Green World, which wasn't my favorite off this album, but when I saw Gorillaz live and they played Oh Green World, that live version is one of the craziest listening experiences I've ever had in my life. Insane track list with an apocalyptic feel, with some great singing from 2D, great features, beautiful instrumentals. Like, listen to Don't Get Lost in Heaven and tell me that isn't beautiful, because you can't tell me that. It's such a beautiful album with its dark themes, and that's why I love it. Now let's talk about Blonde by Frank Ocean. In my opinion, this is his magnum opus. This album is perfect. I think the track listing here is great. I love how each track flows from each other. I think this album is very minimal. You know, there isn't a lot of eccentricity going on within the production, within the vocals, but you don't necessarily need that to make an amazing album. All you need to do is, pluck at the heartstrings, get to the feels, And that's what Frank Ocean does with songs like Self-Control, probably my favorite Frank Ocean track. That one gets me like every single time. There's classics like Ivy, Nikes, Pink and White, Solo, White Ferrari, Siegfried. I could keep going. Every track here is performed perfectly by Frank. If you feel like crying, if you are in a sad mood, this is an album you would go to, especially if it's revolving relationships. Then yeah, this is an album that's perfect for that. And to think, I wasn't even a big fan of this album when it was first released. I've talked about this before. It took me so many listens to finally click, but once it clicked, this album just stuck with me since then. And I'm glad it did, because it's a perfect track list. It's insanely good, and I kind of wish Frank Ocean would drop more music, but if this is the way he wants to end things, I can't be mad, because this is perfect. It is. Alright, last album I'm going to talk about. I hope you all take a seat, because I'm going to get a little serious. Let's talk about Ants From Up There by Black Country New Road, which I actually reviewed on my TikTok within the same year that this album was released, back in 2022, and I actually gave it a 9 out of 10. You know, I love the album, obviously giving it a high score. The lyricism is very dense but poetic at the same time. The instrumentals, you could tell, was taken care of with so much care, and it's such a unique sounding rock album when they implement these strings and these flutes and all these beautiful sounding instruments within these tracks that could be very chaotic at times. And the singing from Isaac Woods here is jaw-dropping. Honestly, one of the best performers I've ever listened to on any album. The amount of emotion and passion he had within his voice and the ability to put it all out there within their music is incredible. And I will forever thank him for putting so much effort within an album like this. The only issue I had with it was Bread Song and the intro. I thought it just took too long. It sounded a little weird to me. But the more I thought about it, you know, I still, like, to this day, never skipped the song. I never skipped the intro to the song. Kind of just accepted it. And, you know, just because there's a weaker portion on a song doesn't mean I have to take away an entire point and not consider this album a classic, not consider this album perfect. Because it basically is. It's as perfect as an album can be, even with that tiny, tiny complaint. Like, it's such a minuscule complaint that it's silly for me to even give this a 9 out of 10, when even part of me back then knew that this was a perfect album, and I was just trying too hard to give it that perfect rating. But yeah, there's songs here like The Place Where He Inserted the Blade that has just stuck with me for so many years. But ultimately, what made me really change my mind is how much this album was there for me when I needed it, because it did soundtrack one of the most bittersweet moments in my life. Because in 2022, I went to Guatemala and I got to see my grandpa and spend time with him for the final time. He had cancer at the time. We all knew it, and we all knew that he didn't have much time. But, you know, we made sure to spend a lot of time with him that summer. And the day came where we had to go to the airport and head back. And, you know, although people beat cancer all the time, it's not something realistic in this situation. So when we said goodbye and gave each other a hug, we knew that was our last hug. We knew what was going on, the both of us. It was clear as day. So that was the last time we physically said bye to each other. We physically hugged each other. We physically touched each other. And yeah, on the car ride to the airport, the first album I thought of putting on was this album. Not because of the themes of the lyrics or anything like that, but because of the emotional impact that it always given within Isaac's vocals. It felt like something that I really related to at that moment. So as we drove away, I looked at the window. It was the typical, like, looking out the window, rain pouring down. You could see the droplets on the window while looking at the gray sky and the very green atmosphere. I was playing this album, and from beginning to end, I was just bawling. I was crying the whole time because I knew that was the last time I saw him. And yeah, October 4th that year he died, and it's been tough, but I've been handling it better than I thought I would. So there's that. And you know, as much as it hurts, I'm glad music exists for moments like that. You know, because I don't know how I could have handled, like, even though I was balling and stuff, I probably would have been worse off if I didn't have an album like this on my side. Because of how much emotion I associate this album with, because of how I associate this album with such a bittersweet moment, and how it has impacted my life, especially during a year that 2022 sucked. Like, I lost my grandpa, I lost my dog that same year. Because this album was with me for such difficult times and soundtrack such bittersweet moments, how can I give this a 9 out of 10? You know? Like, again, at the end of the day, music is subjective. If I want to give this album a 10, I'll give it a 10. Even if it's based off of just personal experience, why not? So, Hands From Up There by Black Country New Road is a perfect album in my opinion. And yeah, that's everything. That's all 10 albums I wanted to talk about today. 10 albums that I would consider a 10 out of 10. Basically celebrating the date, 10/10, October 10th, 2024. So yeah, I'm done here. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked the video, makes sense, right? Comment down below. What are some albums you consider perfect? If you could leave 10, that would be perfect. That would be great. But if you just want to name a few, I'm fine with that too. If you like music related content like this, please subscribe, since that is what I do here. And if you're already subscribed and you want more of this for some reason, check out my Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. If you're into basketball, check out my basketball podcast. It's called Above the Rim Rundown, where we run down all things NBA. I do it with a buddy of mine, and it's very fun, very interesting. So check it out if you're interested. But yeah, I'm done here. So thank you guys for watching. I love you guys. Goodbye.